The U.S. Surgeon General has called it an urgent public health crisis, a devastating decline in the mental health of kids across the country. According to the CDC, the rates of suicide, self-harm, anxiety, and depression are up among adolescents, a trend that began before the pandemic.
Lockdowns and social distancing may be good for public health, but research shows it's worsening depression for young adults.
We estimated he took 400 pills.
Tara Cole said pandemic isolation contributed to her 11-year-old son's suicide attempt.
He just said he didn't see that there was much worth living for. So I think it was just too many things felt like it was stacked against him.
The latest American Psychological Association report shows half of Gen Z teens, 13 to 18-year-olds, report the coronavirus pandemic has made planning for their future feel impossible. More than 2 in 3 Gen Z adults in college say the coronavirus pandemic makes planning for their future feel impossible.
Shalom. I would like to give all honor, glory, and praises to YAHAWAH BAHASHam YAHAWASHI BAHASHam YAHAWASHI. I would like to give double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone. Salutations to all you sincere Akim, pushing this word out across the four corners of the world. Just another news update through the spirit, the power, and the vibration of YAHAWAH BAHASHam YAHAWASHI. In this lesson, the spirit is going into the burden of Egypt, and that's referencing to America. And this is an article from newstarget.com, and the title says, Survey reveals mass mental illness in Generation Z, with 57% of young people now taking medication just to cope. And this was published on November the 14th, 2022. And before I get that, let's get right quick. 2nd Esdras, the 15th chapter, starting at verse 1. And it says, Behold, speak thou in the ears of my people the words of prophecy. And prophecy means a prediction, a divination. And more so, you're saying something before it actually occurs or takes place, which I will put in thy mouth. And that's only for the holy prophets that YAHAWAH BAHASHam YAHAWASHI has ordained from the beginning of time, said the Lord. Verse 2, and cause them to be written in paper, and that's referring to the Holy Bible, for they are faithful and true. And our Lord and Savior, YAHAWASHI, he comes within the volume of the book. And he stated in Matthew the 24th chapter, how heaven and earth should pass away, going into these different rulerships, but his words should not pass away. So it shows you everything that he has declared within the scriptures, they are faithful and true. Which takes me right to this article, which indicates to us through the spirit, we are definitely within these end times. So survey reveals mass mental illness in Generation Z, and Generation Z consists of anybody that was born from 1997 to 2012. They are known as Generation Z, with 57% of young people now taking medication just to cope. And it says, after facing 2.5 years of lockdowns, restrictions, fear propaganda, isolation, and harmful mandates, the young and aspiring Generation Z are dealing with several mental health conditions. An analysis conducted by Harmony Healthcare IT finds that millions of young adults are dealing with new mental health problems that were brought on during the C-19 scandal. According to the Pew Research Center, Generation Z represents the generation born between 1997 and 2012, which encompasses approximately 68 million young people ages 10 to 25. The latest survey finds that 42% of Generation Z now struggle with mental health problems, and many of these issues are treated with daily therapy and medication. These problems include anxiety disorders, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which is ADHD, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder, which is PTSD. 80% deals with bouts of depression and 90% deal with anxiety on a daily basis. And concerning Esau's pharmaceutical industry, which has become global now, and for the ones of the people who are in the know them as Big PHARMA. And I don't want to say the actual word due to YouTube's algorithm. So this particular industry, they administer these chemical substances, which are harmful drugs, and they reap great profits, rewards, and benefits. But what is it causing the everyday American people? Their health, their lives. And that's why it's stated in Ezekiel the 28th chapter in the 5th verse, by thy great wisdom and by thy traffic hast thou increased thy riches. And that traffic goes into his merchandise. Yes, it can go into his different global imports and exports, his different services, but it also can go into his human trafficking, his drug trafficking. So by his traffic, he's increasing within his monopolies. And he sets up these different prescription drug stores, such as CVS Pharmacy, Walgreens, and the list goes on. And these are nothing but Esau's trap houses. And these different places are getting these everyday American people hooked upon these drugs. Because the only means that these people can be able to so-called function or cope within this society is by having their pharmaceuticals, which are nothing but left-hand or demonic spirits, sorceries, and witchcrafts that Esau is administering out here. And that's why it says in Nahum, the 3rd chapter, because of the multitude of the whoredoms of the well-favored harlot, and that's referencing to America, the mistress of witchcrafts, that selleth nations through her whoredoms by that Babylonian wine, and families through her witchcrafts. And Esau's global pharmaceutical industry is just another component for his sorceries and witchcrafts. And the true medicine or healing for our people, the biblical Israelites that are caught up into these mental health problems, is first and foremost by adhering to the words of YAHAWAH BAHASHAM YAHAWASHI. Matter of fact, let's get there right quick. In Wisdom of Solomon, the 16th chapter, the 12th verse. For it was neither herb nor mollifying plaster that restored them to health, but thy word, O Lord, which healeth all things. And more so, this is for the ones of our people who are already preordained to receive this engrafted word, referring to the hopeful elect. And yes, the Most High does have different outlets. You have the dieting, the exercising, the list goes on. But nothing of that sort can be compared to by rightly dividing the word of truth. So going back to the title of this article, if people are already bugging out, being super overwhelmed by the problems within the society right now, and that's taking a major effect upon their mental, just imagine the vibration and the mindset when this society, America, totally collapses. When these people are not going to be capable of getting their so-called meds just to cope. So through the spirit, as you can see, we are about to enter a cold place. This place is about to turn very cold. And that's why it says in Jeremiah, the 30th chapter, that day is great and none is like it, referring to the time of Jacob's trouble. And that takes me right to Matthew 24:3. And as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, referring to Yahawashi, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, Tell us, when should these things be? And what should be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world? And we, as the ones who have this special gift of understanding, we are seeing spiritual indicators like day by day now. And when you are seeing a young generation, such as this Generation Z, being heavily succumbed by these drugs or so-called meds, just to be able to function within the society, then that tells you right there through the spirit, we are at the end. And when this place, America, shuts down, and these people are not going to have the ability to cope with their means, it's going to get very twisted and cold out here. And that takes me right to Matthew 24, verse 12. And because iniquity should abound, going into the sins and transgressions of this place, remember America is known as that sinful kingdom, because they do everything that's in that verse unto the righteousness and the ways of YAHAWAH BAHASHAM YAHAWASHI. So this is a backward society. When you're trying to do right by abiding by the word of YAHAWAH BAHASHAM YAHAWASHI, you get defamed, or you get mocked or scoffed at. But if you are spiritually in tune with wickedness of this society, then you get praised, you get elevated, you get the so-called rewards, riches, and fame of this society. So this is another spiritual indicator that we are at the end, because we are seeing sins and transgressions be existent in large numbers or amounts. So, and because iniquity should abound, the love of many should wax cold. And that's going into how these people are losing their compassion, their respect, their generosity and love toward one another as they once had. Now it's being gradually turned into a cold, bitter spirit, because we are entering spiritually into some cold, bitter times. So the love of many should wax cold. Let's get that word cold in the Greek, suko, and as you can see, it's spelled as psycho. That takes me to the etymology online for psycho, which is acquainted with psychological, and it's also acquainted with psychopath. And by these American people being addicted to these pharmaceutical drugs, they are getting more demonic vibrations upon them. Because dealing with Esau, he deals with sorceries and witchcrafts. So he's enchanting these people by his spells. So for the word psychopath, it has a morally irresponsible person, considered as mentally deranged, going into somebody that's twisted or insane, one who obeys his impulses regardless of social codes. So again, when these people do not have the ability to get their so-called meds so they can be able to cope or function within the society, just imagine the spirit of lawlessness that's going to be out here. All right, so back to the article. Loneliness, uncertainty, anxiety, and depression now grip most young people. A majority of young people who responded to the survey, 75%, report that the pandemic lockdown era negatively impacted their mental health, bringing about severe loneliness and an overwhelming uncertainty about the future. Of the 1,000 respondents, 20% now see a therapist on a regular basis, and 39% get therapy for mental health issues once a week. A shocking 57% take some form of medication on a regular basis just to cope. This generation is 2 times more likely to struggle with emotional distress than the 2 generations that came before, Millennials and Generation X. And also to mention that this particular generation, referring to Generation Z, Esau Edom heavily pushed upon his negative influence, that LGBT propaganda going into his Babylonian wine, upon this particular generation, where they indoctrinated and groomed these young children at a very young age. So they were heavily seduced by the wicked. And that's why we believe through the Spirit that this Generation Z has to be the last generation. So jump on down, and it says, many of these mental struggles are based on Generation Z's beliefs about the future. A majority, 85%, openly admit that they are worried about the future in general. They worry about things like the economy, having enough money to survive, the environment, and an increasingly divided political landscape. Nearly 90% believe that their generation won't be successful at all in the future, and 75% believe their generation is at a disadvantage when compared to previous generations. Which takes me right to Isaiah, the 19th chapter, starting at verse 1. The burden of Egypt. And that burden goes into like an overload, like a lot of pressure, anxiety, emotional distress, depression, oppression, and the list goes on upon a person's back. And by the elites of Esau Edom pushing out these draconian measures, that's pushing more of these people to the edge. And especially these people who are heavily medicated by Esau's pharmaceutical industry. So the burden of Egypt. And this is referencing to spiritual Egypt, America. Because when you read Revelation 11 chapter in the 8th verse, it goes into about that great city, which is spiritually called Sodom and Egypt. Because America imitates their customs, their ways, their ideologies from these ancient kingdoms. So the burden of Egypt, behold, the Lord ride upon a swift cloud and shall come into Egypt, and the idols of Egypt shall be moved in his presence, and the heart of Egypt shall melt in the midst of it. And as you can see through the Spirit, this place is on a great spiritual decline. It's circling the drain on all levels. So the part of this article is going into how the majority of this Generation Z are worried about the future of this economy, which is biblical prophecy. And that takes me right to Ecclesiastes, the 12th chapter, the 3rd verse. In the day when the keepers of the house should tremble, and that's going into these economists, these financial market watchers, and the strong men should bow themselves, and the grinders cease because they are few. And Amazon, they just laid off about 10,000 employees just this week. So the grinders cease because they are few, and those that look out of the windows be darkened. Which goes into how these American people are losing their hopes, their dreams, their aspirations that they once had for a better outcome within America. So now it's being gradually turned into uncertainty, perplexity, difficulties. And that's beautiful that YAHAWAH BAHASHAM YAHAWASHI is doing that to these proudful American people. And just dealing with your everyday life, you can see that these American people have that dismal, gloomy type of look upon their faces. They do not know if they're coming or going. And this is the type of vibration we as the hopeful elect are looking forward to upon this place. Because the more that this place goes into this direction, the closer our kingdom comes. And it says, much of the worry comes down to personal finances, as 90% fear that they can't make ends meet each month. 66% of the respondents don't feel financially stable at all. About half of the respondents don't feel ready to join the workforce, and most are concerned about the future of the economy. During the C-19 scandal, governments destroyed the value of the currency, defrauding the public. This has driven up the cost of practically everything, making it nearly impossible for one to survive on the old minimum wage, let alone purchase a home. And right here, as you can see, young people face constant psychological abuse and spiritual oppression. And that's by the means of Esau's Babylonian wine, pushing forth these false gender identities and stereotypes upon the youth. Especially by these people not being inclined with YAHAWAH BAHASHAM YAHAWASHI, that's taking a toll on their minds. So the only way they can be able to cope with themselves and to be able to so-called function within the society is by going the route of Esau's pharmaceutical industry. And again, which is one of his many ways that he has increased his riches. That traffic. And that takes me to Revelation, the 18th chapter, the 23rd verse. And the light of a candle should shine no more at all in thee. And this is referring to the great glory of America, or Babylon the Great. Because when you read Jeremiah 51:7, it says Babylon had been a golden cup in the Lord's hands. Going into America's impact, influence, that they have enticed these other nations by the means of that Babylonian wine. So all these nations have drunken the wine of her philosophy. So now through the spirit of prophecy, we are headed to the times of America is about to get their just due. And that's why it says, and the light of a candle should shine no more at all in thee, and the voice of the bridegroom and the bride should be heard no more at all in thee. And that's the fading glory of America. For thy merchants were the great men of the earth. And that's going into these foreign countries that have made business trade with America. And America is the largest importer throughout the whole world. And here's the point, for by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. And let's get that Greek word for sorceries. And it says pharmakia, or some people might say pharmakia. And for the Strong's definition right here, it says medication, pharmacy, magic, sorcery, witchcraft. And it's in our law as the biblical Israelites. It says, thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. In Exodus, the 22nd chapter, and the 18th verse. So this is just one of the many reasons why the tabernacle of Edom has to be taken down. And this is a great reason why these everyday American people, and more so 57% of this Generation Z, are suffering from these mass mental illnesses. And that's because they are loyal customers of Esau's pharmaceutical industry. And as the saying goes, a customer cured is a customer lost. Too big, PHARMA. So you can just imagine the level of hell, chaos, and turmoil that's going to take upon this place where these people do not have the abilities to be able to get their so-called meds. So that was just a quick news update through the spirit, and hopefully you all was edified, you all stay strong, keep pushing forward. Shalom.